Listen up.
Welcome to the PowerShell Podcast, the podcast for PowerShell and the PowerShell community. And now, here's your host, Andrew Plaw.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the PowerShell Podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Plaw, at Andrew Plaw Tech. We have a very fantastic episode in store for you. Chrissy and I were actually sitting here preparing tirelessly to bring you the best episode we could, and then we started chatting and it was too good. We had to stop preparation, go straight into it. So I want to cover a couple of cool things that have been happening recently in the community, and by that I mean I want to shine a spotlight on a bunch of videos. As mentioned in a previous episode, I mentioned that the PSConfEU sessions are live on YouTube. Very fast turnaround, very impressive, very fortunate. We can ride the buzz, check out the cool talks you've heard about here on the podcast. Check out Chrissy's talk, AI at Work. That's one I want to spotlight. Also, Miriam did a session on practical PowerShell empowerment for protectors. Blue team. I love Miriam and all the stuff she's doing for security and Microsoft and PowerShell in particular. So shout out Miriam. Also, there's a cool session from Summit, because I know those videos are online as well. There's a whole bunch of awesome sessions out there. And if you're not starting to chip away at some of these topics or new skills you want to learn, you're missing out on an opportunity here. There's a lot of really great content out there, and they can dive into things in a much deeper way than you could get in a podcast. So it's great to hear about things. It's also great to get your hands dirty and apply what you see in talks. That's my recommendation. Don't just watch and be like, yo, that's cool, I'll do that one day. Go through it. Make sure you have a little test environment. Play around a little bit. Have some fun. Learn some things. Get hands-on. That's one of the takeaways we have from a bunch of episodes. It's like, have a way to test things and do things and learn and grow that's not going to crash your whole company's environment. We want to avoid that when possible. All right, that's enough videos. Check them out. Check out the playlist as well. I'll have links to all these things in the show notes, but I want to get straight into the episode because we have a very special guest. It's been about 6 months. She's one of my favorite guests. I won't say the absolute favorite. Dual MVP. Hey, I can't. SQL extraordinaire. And you've been doing some really awesome things in the AI space for a while and putting it to work. AI at Work. Shout out to the talk. Welcome to the podcast, Chrissy LeMaire.
Hey, thank you. I'm so excited to be here to talk about AI and PSConfEU. That was so awesome.
Gosh, how was it? Because this was your first conference in person in a while, right?
5 years. In July of 2019, I was just like kind of done speaking. I was like, it's that I don't want to get nervous anymore. And so I'm going to stop doing this. And I had no idea that it would be 5 years. But man, coming back and seeing everybody and also meeting a whole bunch of people for the first time, like you mentioned, Miriam, we had like kind of passed by each other at PSConfEU. Back, I think in 2017, but we hadn't had a chance to actually hang out. And at this time, we were in the speakers room together all the time. I haven't had a chance to see her talks because we were always at the same time. But man, I heard that her talks were absolutely phenomenal, and I can't wait to check them out on YouTube.
Link in the show notes. Awesome.
Yes.
That is so cool. That's my favorite thing about conferences is that you can kind of come full circle with a lot of people that maybe you've seen, you learned something in the past, and you can say like, hey, I've actually really appreciated you. And it's really cool to get to meet you.
It is, man. There were so many at PSConfEU. I didn't realize. So I talk a lot with Jordan Borean, and it's funny. So as an American in Europe, I'm used to I guess my brain prepares itself to hear an accent of sorts, and then I kind of place where maybe they're from. And I thought that Jordan was American. So he starts speaking, and my brain just had like a blue screen, and I was like, wait, where are you from? And then it was Australia. But it was so awesome to meet him and David Sass. Stephen Butcher, Amber Erickson. I made a list because I'm just like, there were so many people that I met for the first time over there that I had an absolute blast with.
I love to hear it. And how are your talks?
Okay, so the first one, AI at Work, was it had a fantastic reception. I loved giving it. It was very energizing. That was the very first one that I had given in so long. And I guess people had heard about it and they didn't have a chance to see it. So I gave it 2 additional times, which is very fun. So if you would like to see it, I'm actually going to give it again a day to Scotland. And I think that it's either Glasgow or Edinburgh. It's one of those in September. So yeah, it's one of
Let's
my
go.
favorite talks ever. And that one went great. I did have one that was so with AI, and I don't know if we just like jump right into it right now, but
we're in. Feet are wet.
it.
We're in the pool.
All right. So with AI, and I say this in my sessions, that sometimes you have to have a good session on a good day, right? And if you don't, then you start a new session, But with my second one, for the first time in my entire life, my GPT for this particular thing just refused to read the documentation. And it would just answer too quickly. So I'm sitting there, I'm like, so what we want is for it to pause, take as long as you want. And it just wouldn't. And it was a disaster of a demo. So I ended it off saying, listen, you came here because you wanted to build PowerShell universal dashboards using ChatGPT, and it works. It just didn't work today, which sometimes happens. And then what was great, though, was I was able to, PSConfEU does community talks at the end of the week where you can submit to do like a 5-minute talk. And so I submitted, and that demo went swimmingly. And so I was able to, I was able to make up for the extremely failed demo with an extremely great demo that went just as planned.
Redemption. Wow.
Yes, that's the word.
Okay, so there's a lot there. I do have a question about the AI thing. So,
Yeah.
And you mentioned like bad session, bad day. Is that the same thing you're going to experience if you host your own rather than using the hosted product? Is it still susceptible to similar things?
If I had to guess, that's actually a great question. I know that there's a lot of open source models that are available, or sources that are proprietary, but you could still run them locally. I don't have extensive experience with it because I need to beef up all of my hardware, right? As a SQL Server DBA, the thing that I cared about first was memory. And then CPU, but never ever GPU. I'm not a gamer. I RDP to everything, or PowerShell remotely to everything. So I never had to care about it. So I actually have to build up everything. I do have a Mac that probably could run something pretty nicely, but it might just be like Apple stuff. And I really kind of want more experience with the greater, like more models. So I don't have enough experience. If I had to guess, I think that what you're kind of asking is it the vendor throttling it, or are you or is it hardware? Is it magic? If I had to guess, it's magic. Like it's just, maybe like the algorithm. I don't know. But I think that it's a problem that the industry hasn't been able to solve, and thus I think that the answer is going to be unreliable locally as well. Electricity, kind of like when you present at a conference, right? Demos fail. Why is that? I actually asked somebody. I was like, "What on earth could possibly be the reason that it's so consistent?" Because you could practice it all morning long. And somebody had a really, really great suggestion. Can you guess one thing? There could be one thing. Why are the demo gods cruel on the day of the conference?
I have no clue.
The electricity, right? Because you're at a conference center and everybody's plugging in. And so it's just not as reliable of an electrical source. So you're getting like all these waves. Because whenever I was presenting at a pre-con, I believe in Seattle, for the first time ever, I had a machine that completely blue screens. And so I went around looking for answers because I was horrified. And that was one of the most plausible answers that was given to me.
Interesting. Yeah, there is some kind of something's going on there at conferences.
It's electricity, man. I was told that it probably shouldn't happen in the EU because we have different electricity, but I've seen it.
I thought it was just the magic in the air when you get a bunch of passionate
I
PowerShellers together.
thought that it was electromagnetic something. I'm not good with hardware, so I was just
Yeah.
taking wild guesses.
I mean, apparently there's some way for like sun rays to affect your computing, like an errant sun ray. There's
See,
some kind of thing with
yes,
that. Yeah. I'm just like,
exactly along the
listen,
lines of that,
I
right?
just plug stuff in and type some code. If it stops working at a certain point, listen, I'm not your guy.
So yeah, I think that it's going to happen until it doesn't, and they find out a way to make it more reliable. Maybe the
Yeah.
hardware and the way that it works. But I do want to say before I forget, because I might, if you want to run anything locally, like some sort of AI model, I went through so many programs when researching for the book Generative AI for the IT Professional, which I'm writing with my best friend Brandon Atcher for Manning. And I was researching it, and I installed this program called Jan or Jan. I installed another one called Wingman. I installed all of these applications to go and get models from this. It's called Hugging Face. It's like a centralized repository, like ratings and all of this stuff for open source models and all models. And I was always tempted to install the biggest, baddest model. And then I would type in a question, and then my CPU would hit 100, and I would get like a word a minute, right? Well, Microsoft I gave up on all of those, but Microsoft has since introduced something called the AI Toolkit in VS Code. And you have a limited number of models to choose from, and they show CPU or GPU. So you download those, and that works, and it works locally. And I will say this about AI. We're told that it's magic. It looks like magic, but then it turns out in the end that it's all REST APIs. And I literally came on this podcast because I want to show all the different ways that we as the PowerShell community can benefit from AI. It's not just like Bitcoin bros, like this, that. I know that there's a whole scene that's very off-putting within AI, right? But there's also, I think, for serious programmers, extreme benefit. And I have seen, now that I know how it works, and now that I know the possibilities, I am seeing opportunities at work in it automating the boring. And isn't that all what we live for, right?
Yes. Make my job more fun, take away more of the BS.
Exactly. Make it less mundane for everyone.
I love that. And I love that we got some reasonable voices shouting the praises. And I think it is a very interesting space to watch. And I personally use AI.
Nice.
Quite
Awesome.
regularly. I mean, if you know how to phrase things correctly to it, it can be super helpful. Sometimes I need to try twice and that's it. Sometimes I need to like refine, like say, hey, make it a script that accepts input or whatever.
Right.
But I hate a blank slate with anything.
Yes.
Even if I have to rewrite it from scratch, just like give me the for each loop. That helps me so much. Name a couple of the variables. I'll work with it.
Serious. Yeah, it does. That's what I actually, I was telling someone that it takes away a lot of like the boring things. Like, you know what you have to do, and you put, you do a little comment that says what you need to do, and it'll just fill in the blanks. You're just like, but the things that I have seen AI for at work move beyond the interaction. Imagine, have you ever worked with SharePoint documents?
Yeah.
And documents, okay, so you have a document, you store it in a SharePoint library, right? So you're familiar with that. Mm-hmm. And then you have this metadata that's associated with these documents. So let's say that you have court documents, right? And you have, parties involved, case number, jurisdiction, et cetera, right? All of those things. Imagine if you save your file to SharePoint Online, and then it sends it through this service, and there's a JSON file on the other side that literally says, what is the case number of this document? You ask in the language that you speak to an AI model, what's the case number? And it looks through this, and then it answers that. Which jurisdiction was this in? And it'll answer that. So it can actually categorize so many things for you. And whenever I finally learned how to do that, by the way, it's chapter 10. I spent 2 months trying to figure out how to make it like I wanted AI integration. We hear a lot about AI integration, but I was like, oh, that's for Pythonistas. I don't know so much if it's for me, but it actually is. And if you go to everything that I learned, I put into dbatools.ai, which is a domain that resolves. It actually redirects to my dbatools.ai repo, and it shows PowerShell developers how to integrate how to integrate AI and natural language into their own projects. It's something called function calling, and it allows you using that. I extrapolated and went to SharePoint Align and did a whole bunch of stuff in Power Apps there, but it allows you to speak to your data and speak to your PowerShell using natural language. It's absolutely amazing and exciting. And there's the one thing that I took from this. So I was talking to HR and I was like, hey, I can take the information that you need and put it into the SharePoint list. Do you have the Excel spreadsheet? And they're like, yeah, but the thing is that it changes every month. And I was like, oh my God, then you can drop it off into, this like Dropbox on SharePoint. And then I can have a function call say, where does like line A go in this SharePoint list? Because that's what we do, right? We take boring data and then we sift through it and then we put it in another place. And instead of having a human do that, which we could, but we could also just set up a process to automate that. So AI to us as PowerShell developers is really just the next step of automation.
I love that. You got my brain working here. Oh my
God.
Creative juices are flowing.
I cannot wait to show you. I want to do all of these presentations for everyone. And I am going to start going to a bunch of the PowerShell user groups and doing them there so you can keep an eye out. But this is so exciting because I do want us as a community to be super involved because it's fun as hell and it's for us as well. Go on, sorry.
Well, I want to wrap my head around this because I'm thinking, I got my way of thinking. I don't know how you implemented this. So we're thinking SharePoint documents.
Yeah.
I imagine you've kind of done the headway of like connecting to the SharePoint library and getting access of the contents to your AI and like,
yes,
that part needs to be connected.
Right.
And then you can sort of like, do you have what you do from there hard coded, or you just have the data set available and then you have the ability to ask questions with natural language?
So if you have a browser, I can give you something that you could see immediately. We could go together if you're interested. Okay.
Let's go on a ride. Let's go on a journey.
You got it. Okay. So go to gptmaker.dev/JSON, JASON, right?
Yep.
So now you should see my gist called cat.json. And you see all of this is JSON plus English, right? So you have what area of law does this document primarily belong to? And then you give it an enumeration. And then you go next. What type of legal document is this? What are the names of the parties involved? You talk to AI in your language. And then what it'll do, okay, so let's say so what you could do is you could say, let me see if there's a true false on here. One of the questions, I'll just say it the way that I have it in dbatools.ai. So one thing, it isn't exactly magic, which was kind of a bummer to me, right? I was scared because this is what I was thinking. This is what I was thinking with, I was like, all right, how is it going to query my database? I've heard about this. How does it work? I don't want to give OpenAI access to my database. That am I going to have to open up a firewall port? How does that work? The boring answer is that you enumerate through your database and you get all the columns and the table names, et cetera, and then you put that in the system instructions, and then you just ship it over. So you could say, what's our employee's next birthday? And it'll say like Robert King has a birthday because the way that it does it is you send it over the database schema. It writes back to you using these function calls, using a similar JSON. It writes back and it gives you a SQL query, right? And you can take that SQL query and you can execute it. But what I do is I send it back and I ask two questions. Tell me true or false. Is this a valid SQL query? You know, like if it starts out with an exercise bike, that's not like valid selects. It's not, you know, DDL, data definition language, whichever one of those that is. I'm a bad DBA. And then you can also say, is it dangerous? And then you define what dangerous is. Dangerous is anything that modifies data, and it'll come back with a true false. So you could take that in your PowerShell and act on it. So it sends me back a SQL query. I ask it a couple questions. If it says, yes, it's valid, no, it's not dangerous, then I ship that off to invoke DBA query. And it goes internally to my database and it executes that. And then it says, Robert King's birthday is coming up on May 29th. He's a sales rep.
Okay. There's a lot to that. I want to talk about fine-tune it a little bit more, but that's what you've said really makes sense to me. Okay. So we're dealing with, you said APIs a whole bunch. That's a PowerShell strong suit. Hello. So we're we're cooking there. Maybe we even have some experience with it. I think you do going into it. We got this JSON that sort of defines it. And the way I think about this is AI is not just a one-point answer question. You are able to build in guardrails and additional functionality that will allow you to rely on it more. Because otherwise, it's my current workflow. I look at it manually. I see if it's all right. We keep going. I don't have like all those checks built in. And maybe you could do one prompt that has like a bunch of that. But this seems to be a better way because it's sort of a step removed. And
it's structured.
You can and you can define like, we just want true or false. We just want you to return like what category based on these. Like that's where a lot of things can get a little bit loose if you're not using this type of approach. Also, there's tons of businesses worth a good amount of money that are built on kind of their whole business is like implementing this. What you're showing. Have you thought about, I don't know, starting a side hustle?
You know, I am terrible at making money with open source software. I have tried it a couple times, and I think that the reason is because like the only thing that I want to do is program, right? I used to have a consulting company, as a matter of fact. So I have netnerds.net. I created it in 1997. If you look at when netnerds.net was registered, I actually asked my dad for $70. That's a lot of money. Like 1997 money is huge. He gave me the $70. I started a business with it. And then I just found myself chasing companies, trying to get paid, right? So yes, every day I want to make buku money off of the things that I do, but I just, I just can't. I have no interest in all the parts that do all of that.
Yeah.
I do look for the opportunity, but I think ultimately probably I would just make a damn good developer advocate for another company. And only though, if I am talking about things that I'm very excited about. And so Microsoft, if you're listening, I'm super interested in your AI, open AI stack, and, can spread it out to multiple communities.
Heck yes. I hope you get it from this interview.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, that'd be awesome. But I think it's, making money aside, I think that it's really cool too. Like learning these skills and getting hands-on with this stuff is so fun and relevant, but also I imagine super interactive and engaging. Like what you have at the end is a very fun thing to interact with.
Yeah. So not only is that thing fun, I actually so you mentioned FineTuner. That is a program or a PowerShell module that I developed back in September of last year because I wanted to understand how this worked. Like I wanted some of that mystery to go away. And FineTuner, what it does is it fine tunes a model which doesn't give you as solid. So that's the way that OpenAI trains their models, right? Using fine tuning and JSON-L. But what I found, I was like, wait, it's just like it's not as good of results as I thought. And it turns out that when you fine tune something, you give it long-term memory. Like it'll be good if you kind of teach it a style, like for PowerShell and all of its nuances. And if you did like a PowerShell kind of in general way to build its output. But when it comes to short-term memory, which is actually the thing that we want, right? That is going to be something called a vector store. And that's the other project that I have called, so pshelp.copilot, I wrote to understand short-term memory versus long-term memory. And if whenever you're working with DBA tools, there's over 700 commands. I'm probably the only one that can say, well, you're probably going to want to use this command, because there's 700 of them. But since I'm not working with DBA tools so much, that is kind of leaving my memory. But imagine if we could upload all of our documentation that we work so hard on into like a little vector store, like a little database that the model can talk to every time that you ask it a question. Imagine if you could interact with PowerShell help using natural language, saying something like, hey, what's the best command that I could use to encrypt all of my databases at once? And that is short-term memory vector stores. And if you use pshelp.copilot, which is a new module, it will do it for you. And of course, it has that DBA tools magic where you just say new dash module assistant dash module. You say DBA tools. And if you have your API key in there, it'll build up all of this for you. And then you can interact with it that way. And it's fun. It's fun to build, and it's fun to use, and it's fun to extend upon. And this isn't just a session just to push my stuff, because I did write something else that was full that sits on top of it. Because what I want to show is that you can use AI in so many different ways. I now have, if you use GitHub Copilot Chat, right? One of the downsides of it is that you say, what's the last version of DBA tools that you're aware of? And it's like, I was trained in July of 2021, and I know about 1.x, right? And with that, it'll help you build new stuff. It'll help you code, but it won't help you with more modern, recent versions of the modules that you're working with. But I built something in TypeScript using AI, using Claude and OpenAI. I built the Assistance Chat extension, and I actually just published it yesterday. If you're using GitHub Copilot Chat, you can use this assistant where you just do @assistant and you actually talk to it, and it'll go out to OpenAI and it'll grab one of the assistants that you create. And I'm so sorry, I got ahead of myself, and you're probably like, what is an assistant? So you've heard of custom GPTs, right?
Yeah. It's sort of like your own prompt kind of thing, and a dedicated history and stuff.
Exact. I love custom GPTs. So what they do is, let's say that you need it to, like, you're doing a task over and over, right? And we used to say in PowerShell, if you're going to do something more than once, then you should just code it up, right? And make it into a command or a module. And, but now if I'm finding myself doing a task more than once in Gen AI, in, ChatGPT, then I'll create a custom GPT for it. I'll give you an example. I used PS OpenAI as my OpenAI interactive module. And I wanted to contribute to the project, and the first thing I wanted was to kind of change the style, and I adhered by his style, right? So I gave him we decided on the style, and then I went, but I was removing the backticks and turning them into splats. And so what I had to do was copy, paste this, and then it would give me back the splats. That is a repetitive task. So I created a custom GPT solely that just takes your code and turns it into a splat, right? Another thing is if you paste in all of your command, like your entire command, and you say, custom GPTs love examples. And what I did was I gave it an example of help that I really liked. It had a short synopsis. It had description that's like two sentences long. And I would just paste in my commands, and then it would build that PowerShell help. So I use custom GPTs like mad across the board. Yes, you give it context, you give it instructions, you tell it the way to work, etc. And to get back to what I was saying earlier, assistance. That is the API's equivalent of a custom GPT. So you give it specific instructions. You tell it how to talk. You tell it the output that you want, etc. And now with the pshelp.copilot, I tell it, this is like, I want you to read all of this documentation and answer these questions. This is PowerShell. This is the date that it was created. This is the version that it was trained on, etc. And then you take that, you build up your assistant, and then you pile a VS Code extension on top of that. And you can do that now as a PowerShell developer. I am building extensions out the wazoo because I can apply my PowerShell knowledge.
Using assistant chat extension, yeah?
Correct.
Okay, so that sounds kind of approachable to me. Let me give you some background on me. I use AI. I type interactively, and that's it. I think I created one custom thing once. That's kind of it. Sounds like I have a flight later today. I'm going to be paying for Wi-Fi, and your boy's going to be on OpenAI getting something set up.
Awesome.
But that sounds super approachable, super doable, and also you get to interact with it through VS Code, which is something that everyone's kind of using it. So you should be using it. And that is so, it's just that's it. That's the punchline. That's crazy. That is very simple to get a ton of functionality.
Correct.
From something
and we can just take this. This is our next step too. Generative AI is for Python people. It is for probably Go. It is for all of those people, and it's for us as well. It is our future. We, as PowerShell community, are going to be making tools as well. As a matter of fact, on my LinkedIn, I put that I'm an AI tool maker because I make PowerShell tools, and I'm also making AI tools. And this is the most fun that I have had in years because I could skip all the boring part, and I could just say, I don't have to, whenever I switched my dependencies, right? So I went from PowerShell AI or PS AI, and I went to PS OpenAI. And, with that, there were different commands, different parameters, different everything. And guess what? I didn't have to learn any of that. I uploaded it all to Claude, and I said, here are the commands from PowerShell OpenAI or PowerShell AI. Here are the commands. Here's all the help from PS OpenAI, including the parameters. Figure this out. Redo my entire module and give it all back. And it did. It went through it. It wasn't perfect, but man, did it take down 90% of the tedium for switching between those two dependencies. It's fun now. It's fun.
Okay.
Now I'm so sorry.
No, I'm just excited.
Usually I am a bit more tempered and I have a bit of an agenda, but this is so exciting, and it's so much, but it's so exciting. And all you have to do is try, all you have to do is speak to it in English. You barely even have to learn something new. You just have to continue doing it to get all of this back.
Yeah. It sounds like there's a bunch of easy takeaways. There's a lot of takeaways, but a few very practical things that people could start doing. So how would I give people a tip on the first thing you showed with the JSON thing? What would be the tip for doing something like that?
So what do you mean by tip? Are you talking about a simple implementation?
Maybe an overly simplified way of hey, you need to create this, this, and this, and then all of a sudden you can take advantage and do something similar. Because I know you mentioned a lot of projects. I just want to, for my head.
I know. I did. So DBA tool. So there's two primary things that OpenAI will show developers how to use this thing called function calling. That is, the function calling is AI magic, right? But then it's not. It turns out that it's just REST API endpoints. And the two examples that they always use, the first one is essentially dbatools.ai, right? It's interacting with the database by giving it your schema, and it gives you back some awesome SQL that you execute against the database. The other thing that they always do is getting the weather, right? So a human is able to say, hey, what's the weather like in Chicago, Illinois? And then it knows to take the parameter, city, Chicago, right? Weather. Is it weather? That's what it is in Fahrenheit. What's the weather like in Chicago, Illinois in Fahrenheit? So it knows, let's grab Chicago, Illinois, let's grab Fahrenheit, and let's send it off to another REST API, get the answer, give it back to OpenAI, and then OpenAI then says in natural language, hey, the weather's going to be 74 and sunny through Thursday. So that's what this is all about. It's all about natural language.
Okay. Function calling is sort of the starting point for that. Now, with the example with SQL, are you running this on your SQL Server in like API calls from that process?
Great question. I'm doing it in PowerShell the same way that I would any other module, right? So if you install module dbatools.ai, it's going to install DBA tools. And then it does expect you to have a running SQL Server. And the example that I have there is Northwind. But you can create whatever you want. You could do AdventureWorks, etc. And it runs just the way that DBA tools would run locally at your console. Then it calls out and it brings it back. The reason that you're like, what? I'm not quite getting it is because we expect it to be magic. But all it is your module on your console, on your PC, calling out and doing these things. It sends it out. So it takes this natural language. It sends it out. It comes back in JSON. Says like true, false, or like Fahrenheit, Celsius. And then you take that and then you ship it off to another REST API. And then you come back. And then it's not magic. But it kind of is because you get to speak in natural language. And that's where the magic is. All the rest isn't magic. It's just REST API call.
That's sick. And it just changes the way you think about how you can solve things with PowerShell. The fact that you can interact with APIs back in the day at all was like, oh, the world's open to us. Not only that, but now you have this other huge pivot point to get information on data sets. And using function calling, not only can it like look at your data, but because you give it some information about like the schema and maybe some other things that you're expecting, it's able to give you a lot more well-informed results.
Exactly.
Very sick. Yeah.
Exactly. So it takes that right. So it takes that like that boring part of like whenever you're doing data entry and you're like, oh, here's a cell. Let me put it there. Oh, let me like take this. All you do is you tell it through JSON to do that for you, and then it'll do that. And so one of my first, going back to that SharePoint project that I did, so I have Power Apps. I ship off the contents to my Azure. So just for the record, I don't know if I talked about this in the previous one, but anytime that you're working with Open API, they have the most affordable API. Because you can upload stuff and the storage is much cheaper than Azure. But you'd want to go to privacy.openai.com, opt out of everything. But anytime that you need security, confidentiality, privacy, you're going to want to use Microsoft Azure OpenAI services. So that's what we do, right? We're already in SPO, SharePoint Online. We take that data, we ship it off to our OpenAI model, and we give it that data, and then it writes back, and then I use Power Apps to say, oh, okay, thank you. Here's all of this metadata. Let me update my fields, because even though that's not PowerShell, if I don't know, have you used Power Apps in awesome, great. Then then it's just like some JSON and this composer or whatever. So you just take it, you kind of parse it apart, and then you update it, and it's all using the REST API.
Sweet. Okay. Yeah. That's a pretty big takeaway.
Yeah, it's huge.
And these things, like, it's not exceedingly difficult. I feel like the entry level might be even lower than like working on your first CI/CD pipeline. What do you think?
Oh my God. Let me think this through. Because it took me years working with the DBA tools community, that was the first time that we had a CI/CD pipeline, and it was so foreign to me. But now I'm trying to think, as a person who understands CI/CD pipelines, I think that was a whole brand new concept, and this feels like a whole brand new concept, but then it's not. And maybe if somebody would have told me so it took me 2 months to teach myself this, by the way, and write like chapter 10, and do, what was it? And DBAtools.ai came out of it. That was 2 very compressed months. I think that if anyone would have told me at the beginning of those months, hey, it's just API, it's just REST API and endpoint calls, I think that yes, the answer would have been, oh, I can do this far faster. And especially if I had PowerShell examples that are as tangible as what PSHelp.copilot and DBAtools.ai. I think that if I would have had that, I would have been able to embrace this way faster. And then I will say, it was just last week that even though, I've been talking about AI, being able to have to see its applicability, applied AI at work, as I'm talking through the way that I've done, for like almost 30 years, talking to people. And now I'm like, oh my God, there it is. The same way that you kind of feel when you're like, oh, I could do this in PowerShell. And now it's like, oh, okay, I see where this fits in. I think that you're right. And I would be curious, Andrew, if we could work together and we could see how fast, or not, I mean, not that it has to be fast, but how possible it is for you as a PowerShell developer to start using this and applying it and seeing the possibilities, and actually, delivering a project.
Yeah.
I think it could be fast. I think you're right.
That sounds fantastic. And on behalf of the PowerShell community, I want to say thank you for going through that and putting it into a book and teaching people
My
about
pleasure,
it. So
man.
It's easier for us.
That was my point, that's how I was thinking about it the whole entire time. Like, I desperately wanted to know how to do it. And then when I saw that, whenever I built Fine Tuna, I actually thought that it was just kind of an indulgent project for me as a data person. But now that I see and understand function calling, now I see that it's actually not. We are part of this movement. And this is, honestly, I think that this is the beginning and this is going to be our future. This is what we're going to be doing. By the way, did you know that the PowerShell team actually has a new PowerShell AI shell?
Project Mercury. So
Yes,
in an unreleased episode, I actually talked with
nice.
Steven last week. Steven
Oh,
Booker.
no. Dude, he's so nice. First of all, super love him. I
too.
went and I saw his session, and I was so very excited about it. So awesome. I'm glad then that's going to be covered.
We talked all about it. It's pretty cool. It's really getting me to think about things in a new way. This is going to be a tool that is going to be part of likely your workflow and at
100%.
the workflow in many orgs you join. And when you think about what you can bring to the table as someone with, maybe you have a background in automation, you've been using PowerShell for a while. Well, guess what? You add this new tool to your toolkit, and who knows what's out there for you. There's a lot of exciting opportunity. I wish I was in more of a role to apply it, but I think that for my personal workflow and some things around the office, as they say,
right,
a lot of good uses for that.
Definitely.
So second takeaway. So we had the first takeaway about function calling. The second takeaway was on creating a custom assistant.
Yes.
Or was it a custom prompt? Is custom assistant the right way to refer to it?
So it's the OpenAI calls it a custom GPT. Claude and Anthropic call it a project. However, I can say I don't like the way that Anthropic has implemented what's called custom GPTs or assistants. I'm glad that we're returning to it, because I do want to highlight there are so many different uses for custom GPTs. Like, I just have so many of them. I wish that I had my little thing. Maybe I'll pull it up. But another thing that I use it for, let me give you an example. Like, it provides the context, right? So while it's true, it doesn't make it necessarily any more powerful, right? But imagine if I had to open up a window and every single time be like, I'm a PowerShell developer. I'm really good. Like, I know how to do SharePoint. I'm a SharePoint firm administrator since 2007. I know how to do this. I don't know how to do that. This is the version of Bootstrap that we're using, et cetera, right? I can do that over and over, or I can create a custom GPT that says, hi, I'm Chrissy LeMaire, because in this case, it does know who I am. However, and so that's a shortcut, but if it didn't, then I could just describe who I am, right? I am Windows and Linux administrator. I'm also a PowerShell developer. And then, yeah, I put all of this together, and I actually use a custom GPT to, while I did change, and now I am a SharePoint front end developer, and I do JavaScript and I do CSS. Now I just do it with so much confidence because I know I could just pop open my little custom GPT. It knows about my environment. It knows that I'm, going to be writing for SharePoint online. It knows that I'm doing like SPFX. It knows all of this, and it knows how to talk to me, right? So it'll say, you can create JS docs, and this is similar to PowerShell's comment-based help. So it uses the vernacular that it knows that I'm familiar with. So that is one of my custom GPTs. Then I have the PowerShell help. Then I have the splatter. Let me go look at a couple others that I have if I haven't hidden all. Oh, I use it actually to help write my book. So I don't have to tell it over and over again, I'm Chrissy LeMaire. I'm writing a book with my best friend, Brandon Apsher. Here's our table of contents, right? I have a custom GPT specifically for writing the book. So it knows all of that. Oh my God. So I did create a Pester Copilot. So using pshelp.copilot, I got all of Pester's help together. And I created, so there's two things that you could do at pshelp.copilot. You could either use the assistance API and it'll go and do everything for you. Or if you use ChatGPT, so ChatGPT is the web front end of OpenAI. So instead of using the API, you use their nice front end. That's $20 a month flat. If you use their API, it varies. But the module also exports all of the help in less than 20 files, and it combines it together in a format that is very readable and doesn't waste too many of your tokens. So I did create a Pester Copilot. I did one for DBA tools. I actually have one for my MVP contributions. So as an MVP, we have to, we put these contributions that we do these activities, and I just save myself time by saying, like, these are the things that I value. This is what I'm trying to convey. So instead of opening up a new chat session every single time and say, hi, I'm an MVP, I'm trying to put in my activities, this is the message that I'm trying to convey. Here's why I think it's valuable. I just say all of that up front, and I just open my little context box over and over again to whatever little task that I'm doing. And that's the way that I use custom GPTs.
Okay. And that sounds like a very simple way to get started.
Yes,
very
absolutely.
simple. You have a task or a problem space, and you can now have a consistent prompt that adds more details than I freaking want to type every time, but I end up having to type it anyways because I don't have enough for this prompt.
Right?
So just easy way to do it. I mean, we like PowerShell. Don't repeat yourself. Like, this is a lot of similar sentiments there.
I'm going to add it to my presentation.
You're typically consuming these through the interface, the GUI, right?
Yes. It depends. If a lot of my work in the API is done, but yes, just in general, when I want a little quick something, I do have assistants in the API that I have created, but I'll be honest, most of the time I do it so that I just make sure that it works with my projects. But as a consumer, I am using it with the ChatGPT. I use the Brave browser. Oh my God, my wife was like, hey, we should use Brave. And now the internet is 100 times better because like it makes all of the ads and stuff go away. So anyway, and I made it into a little Brave shortcut. And so now it just sits at the bottom of my dock. And I just open it up. I do want to say the thing again with the privacy.openai.com, anything that I use is like it's always redacted, right? Even though I've opted out of everything possible with OpenAI, when I use any consumer product, including Anthropic Claude, whose like mission and goal is to be very ethical with them. With OpenAI, I do make sure that I redact everything, and I suggest that as well for everyone.
That's solid advice. Yeah, that's one place where it's great to experiment, but it's company data. Potentially, you don't want to mess that up.
Right. So I'll stay, instead of like where I actually work, I'll be like the corporation and change it that way. Just very generic, executives, etc.
Gosh, if people were to see my ChatGPT history, the number of times I've asked her for a bedtime story using my kids' names
Oh my God, I
about
love
X,
it.
Y, and Z. I mean, it's really good at that. It makes me seem like a
Yeah,
genius.
I love that.
You remember back in the day before everyone knew about AI and you could like come up with fake poems or whatever and send them to people and they'd be like, oh my gosh, that was amazing. You just wrote that right now. What can I say?
Yeah, I had it write some Taylor Swift lyrics that were shockingly good. I'm Swiftie.
You got to record it.
Oh my
Get that
God. I
music
mean,
life.
it's not, I didn't say, oh my God, speaking of that, have you ever spoken to ChatGPT?
No, but I was thinking about it many times today. Like, that's how I would like to interact with it. Like, hey, I'm driving in the car. I want to rant off some thoughts. And can you take note of it in like bulleted form? Okay, I need to pack this or need to mow the lawn.
100%. Hold on, watch this.
Okay.
Hey, Sky, it's Chrissy. I'm actually not at a conference this time. I'm doing a podcast. Can you tell the podcast guy what I used you for at the recent this is terrible. At the recent conference? Oh.
Sure thing. At your recent conference, you used me to showcase an interview simulation for a Microsoft Cloud Advocate for AI position. The simulation involved using your resume and the job description to generate impressive, concise, and helpful responses. This demonstrated the benefits of generative AI in preparing for job interviews.
Hey, thank you. Awesome. Bye. Man, I finally got that out. But you could see it was really, we did a back and forth, and I actually recorded it because sometimes it doesn't work and I didn't want to bomb the AI at work presentation. But it speaks so naturally that you can use it for career advancement to say like, hey, can we interview? Can you please like be critical of, or not like, constructive criticism, but can you tell me how I can improve, etc. So that's what I did. I uploaded my resume, I uploaded the job description, and we had kind of a back and forth of questions that could be asked.
That's super helpful. I've talked to a lot of people who are trying to find jobs. Maybe they got laid off, maybe they're getting their career started. And one thing that I see a lot of people struggle with is selling themselves and figuring out how do they present themselves for an opportunity and stuff like that. And it sounds like there might be some helpful stuff here because a lot of it is not the most out there advice, but it helps to have someone with some experience give it. And I think AI might be able to be a little bit helpful there. But what are your thoughts? Because I know you've been helping some people.
I love that.
For a while.
Yeah, I think that's really great. And also, it remembers for some reason. So as you know, as somebody who uses ChatGPT, it doesn't really remember who you are. That's why we have to create these custom GPTs. When you talk to it, it does have a memory to some extent. So she knows that we were just at a conference and these are the activities that we did. So that is really nice, and it makes it easier to talk to. And I think that is a perfect use case to help. And you can even say, hey, I kind of down on myself. I'm not selling myself well. I have a really hard time, or like I am confident, but I just can't do it in front of an interviewer, or the podcast guy. And so can you tell me, sorry, you're the podcast guy, Andrew. So, can we work through this? Maybe I could actually work with Sky to better introduce working with Sky, and then I wouldn't skip over it. So yeah, I think that's really great advice. I love how, by the way, you're breaking this down, because it is so much information, and that is something that I've had a hard time with. Is to I've never done an introduction to PowerShell class or anything, because the beginning is always so challenging. And so I appreciate you breaking this down perfectly for others to be able to consume, because I think it is so important for us to use and to adopt.
Definitely. And the sooner the better.
Yes.
It sounds like there's already a bunch of great use cases people can be using it for. I think a lot of people have already adopted it. I talked to Harm recently, Harm Beanstalk.
Oh, yeah?
He is not using much AI, but
he was at the PSConfEU, wasn't he? Yeah,
yes.
yeah. Yeah, I think that he went to Miriam's sessions. Lucky guy.
Yeah, it's a good chat. But yeah, there's a lot there, and it actually doesn't seem too unapproachable. So a lot of this, me breaking it down stuff, it's not really for everyone else. It's kind of for me, but it is for everyone else. Just very
Right.
selfless guy here. But
it's true. It is also like for me, and the way that I was able to break it down for me, eventually, yeah, you could break it down for others as well.
Sweet. I mean, I'm stoked. I'm hyped on PowerShell stuff. Now I'm hyped to get working on some AI stuff and
excellent.
I need a custom GPT to create show notes, because right now it's just not
exactly.
a good process.
Oh my God, that's a perfect use case. You definitely should.
Yeah, because I just don't like I give it like, I'm okay doing bullet points and I'll change what they say, but most times I have to say make it less cringy. It's still a little cringy.
Yes, 100%. By the way, if you want a more natural speaker, Claude. Claude.ai is my favorite thing. I'll actually use some of Claude's output in my book, but it does have a limit. Like, I will upload a whole bunch of PowerShell, and that's the one that helped me switch dependencies. But you do run out of tokens very quickly, because each time that Claude speaks, every time that you talk to it, it replays the entire conversation. So it's extremely accurate, but you run out of tokens all the time, and it is a point of frustration. What's funny is that recently I noticed that it had a higher token limit, but then it started acting more like ChatGPT, where it forgot the beginning. So I'm like, no, I would rather run out of tokens and have to wait 4 hours and have this super high quality, because I already have ChatGPT. By the way, I don't know if you know this, ChatGPT is free. You can use it, I think, 10 times every 4 hours. So for any of you out there who want to try any of this, you can't create, but you can use custom GPTs, which is really awesome.
Are any of your custom GPTs public?
Yeah, totally. Actually, I need to make a short link for them. If you go to my blog at netnerds.net, by the time this comes out, I'll do a blog post. I have like the Fine-Tuna Copilot, I have PowerShell Universal, I have DBA tools. I have a whole bunch of PowerShell custom GPTs that are available. And Andrew, whenever I first got into custom GPTs, I thought that they were going to be for everyone else, right? That I was going to create a bunch, I was going to like upload. One of my first ones was Cajun French, but I couldn't get it to like read. Now, actually, no, Microsoft has a prompt that's like, read the documents, and it says it maybe 18, 25 different ways, and it finally reads those documents. But I thought that I was going to be creating them for everyone else and using it sometimes. But what I find is that custom GPTs, I use them for myself more than I'm creating them for others. Because, I mean, nobody wants to know, like, nobody wants to use because it's personal info, because that context is important. It ends up that they are mostly personal. And if you were to use my MVP contributions, ChatGPT or custom GPT, it wouldn't be as effective for you, because you are Andrew Plott. By the way, congratulations, man.
Thank you.
I've written that down. I was like, congratulate Andrew. That is awesome. Fantastic. so well deserved. And I'm very, very excited for you. So you can build this. I'll send you my template. But in there, you're like, I'm Andrew Pla. And it's like, oh, yeah, you're the guy who does the podcast. And then, you can have it build all of the descriptions and things like that. Tell it what you value. And then it can write out all of that for you, giving you titles, descriptions, etc.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, the world of AI is out there for you. We've laid out a lot of different ways you could go. We've wet your whistle, and I hope to hear that people get up to some fun stuff, get some productive stuff done. I'm really curious about using it to interact with like data sets and stuff like that. I'm trying to think if I can come up with some use cases. And you know where my mind goes? It goes to transcribing every single episode of this podcast and then going through it and seeing, what did we talk about last time? What's a good follow-up question?
Love that. That is so perfect. Yes.
I just need to hit up Justin Grody, because he wrote something that downloaded all the audio and turned it into transcriptions. And he looks for mentions of his name.
Oh my God, I love it.
Plays
I met him for the first time too. Yeah, that was awesome. Then he plays it. Are you serious?
He plays the audio, and it's called like Get Ego Boost or something like that.
No. So wait, his PowerShell finds the location and then goes and plays it, or does he open up YouTube and then like?
No, it plays the audio clip because he has uploaded it like a bunch of Azure stuff. So he's like,
my God.
Azure Cognitive Services.
Yes.
Finding the moment of time and then playing it with like VLC, I think locally or something.
That is so awesome. I did want to explore that. It is a bit more expensive, and everything I've always done has been kind of on the more affordable side. So I haven't explored that. But now that is such a beautiful use case. I would absolutely love to see it. And it sounds like there's so many moving parts. And it's like perfectly complex. Yeah, just like Justin. That is fantastic.
Love it. Well, I want to get into some common parameters with you before I let you go.
Let's do this.
So I want the first question, and you can take this question. I'm going to ask you a question. You listen and you go wherever the heck you want with it. So
you got it.
What's something that went wrong, maybe on the job, maybe some other way? How did you handle it? And what did you end up learning?
Oh my God. So I started out this podcast talking about it was very hard. The hardest that I've ever bombed in my entire life was at PSConfEU just recently with my session called Building PowerShell Universal Dashboards using ChatGPT. The thing, I was being very pedantic about my interpretation of the title and of the description, right? It said ChatGPT. It didn't say OpenAI. It didn't say AI, right? So I had to use ChatGPT. And then I was just very much sticking by the abstract, because I had actually reached out to Gael and I said, hey, I can't get this to be reliable. It seems like it's an industry problem. And he was like, we're going to have to find, a PowerShell Universal replacement. And I was like, okay, never mind that. I'm going to take this as a challenge. And I bombed. I bombed so hard. And for me, I am a perfectionist who repeats. Like, I will do my presentation over and over and over again until it's muscle memory. And AI is this thing that I was talking to Barbara Forbes, and she was like, it's made me more, what's the word whenever you're like improv? She was like, now I could be improv. I can't imagine myself ever being spontaneous in that way. And so I was doing my presentation and I bombed so hard and I just couldn't dig myself out of it. I couldn't be cool about it. I couldn't like make jokes about it. Probably. I barely remember. I kind of blacked out, right? But what I did was I was like, the only thing good that could come out of this is a blog post on how not to bomb AI presentations. So if you go to netnerds.net, I actually wrote a blog post that outlines, like, use Jupyter notebooks, right? Because even if it's bombing and it's not working, at least you can have a saved session. One of them is like make a recording so that, if it's a crappy day, then maybe the recording will be more engaging. And then there was like one other thing. So that's what I learned. I think that in the future, I'm always going to have a Jupyter notebook for my presentations. Thanks to David Sass. It's so hard for me to say his name, and but I'm trying. David, I do like this. David, there we go. David. He did a presentation on notebooks. And I was like, why haven't I been doing this? And then Justin Grody was like, why haven't you been? I was like, I don't know. And so now I use that. And for my presentation, that was very successful, by the way, I was using a Jupyter notebook. So that's what I learned was that AI presentations are unreliable. And so there's a couple backup things that you could do to not bomb so very deeply.
I think one of the other tips was use a seed.
Oh, there we go. I love that. So a seed will give you predictable results. So because whenever you open up a window, that was something that was quite funny. And thank you for looking that up. That was something that was quite funny is that I opened it up and I was like, and here's where it's gonna tell you that it hasn't been trained since, version 2.01. And then it was like, I was recently trained in January of 2024 on this very recent version. And I was like, is this new? And then I opened up a new window and it went right back to 2023 and everybody laughed. So they were able to see that with seeds, you're going to get mostly the same answer. So if you're a person who rehearses 100,000 times, then you'll be able to do that.
Sweet. With your knowledge now, what is one tip you would give yourself when just getting started in AI?
I would do everything the exact same. So it's hard for me to say, oh, there is one thing that I learned just recently. Sometimes when you are working with GitHub Copilot chat, it feels like where are you getting this information from? Like there's not enough. I feel like it could be better. And the way that you make it better is by opening a whole bunch of files that are related, right? And then it has more context to give you better answers. That's what I would do.
Solid suggestion. And I'm going to give you a little extra question before the final question.
Got it.
What is your favorite book on AI currently being written with you and your best friend? Can you give it another plug?
So this is, it's called Generative AI for the IT Pro. And what I really love about this book is that it is applied AI. It's not pie in the sky. It's not theory. We give real life examples that we have either used at work or we could use at work in a very practical way, or that we've kind of used it this way and here's a slightly different way. I love it because it is broken down into like the tech part, right? And then the people part where it talks about conflict resolution. So it's aimed at IT professionals who are just getting into AI. It gives you just as much information as you need. You don't get like bogged down in the data science stuff, but we do need to know some things, like we need to know tokens, and so it touches on those, and I appreciate the plug. Thank you very much. It is a book that people are telling me they find very useful, and they're looking forward to more chapters coming out. So it's very rewarding. It is something that people are enjoying and learning from.
I mean, I'm happy for you. I know you're in a position to be helping a bunch of people. You helped me on my AI journey, so I'm really excited to see how fulfilling this feels for you over the coming years. And as you see people go through their AI journeys, and it's kind of a very exciting space to be in right now.
It is. It really is, and very fun.
Top 3 modules or projects. We'll leave it open, and feel free to do callbacks to some of the awesome projects you mentioned earlier.
All right, so let me go to my little projects list.
3, throw that out of the bag. Give me what you got.
Oh, well, no, I mean, because I forget sometimes, right?
Oh, I forget all the time.
Oh, my God. Hey, I just released a new Visual Studio Code theme. It's based off of my favorite theme called 1984 Unbolded. But with that one, it had a purple background, right? And so I released the more modern version called 2024. So if you look up Visual Studio Code themes for 2024, you might have to throw in a Chrissy in there because I think 2024 matches on really large Google projects. But that is a theme that I just released that I really like using. It does feel more modern. Again, if you want to explore PowerShell modules, especially large ones like DBA tools, like Pester, you can use pshelp.copilot to create either an API assistant or a custom GPT, or you could use mine. There is dbatools.ai, and it's not pay, it's not a product. It is actually a teaching tool that you can learn from and see how to integrate. I even have these like mermaid flowcharts that try to make it as straightforward as possible to learn how to do AI integration, and the recently released assistance chat extension that brings your API assistance into GitHub Copilot chat, making it more updated and relevant.
Okay, sick. You've been busy. I love it because you're not just writing about a book where it's like, here's how to write a good prompt and it's 20 chapters of that. You're actually out here doing stuff. And I want to let you know that I am the 5th downloader of 2024 and it's my new default. It actually looks nice. It's my vibe.
Yeah, I do really like it. It's my favorite. I tried some others and I'm just like, nope, this is the one. I really like 2024. Yeah, I think I released that yesterday because I needed it on my VS Code Insiders, and I kept like going to like the default, and I was like, no, I need to put this out there. So thank you for downloading and installing the VS Code 2024 theme by Chrissy LeMaire.
Team Chrissy. Awesome.
Thank you, man.
Well, thank you, Chrissy, for joining me today. Thank you, everyone out there, for listening. If you're walking, if you're running, if you're driving, if you're swimming, swim safe or do whatever else safely. If you're into PowerShell and you're still early on in your journey, I salute you. Stick with it. Thanks for listening in. If you're still here after quite a while, you're on the right track. You're into this stuff. You're passionate. I'm happy that we are friends and all part of this awesome community together. I think there's a lot of great takeaways in this episode. I encourage people to actually take that next step. Check out Chrissy's talk from this year.
Thank you.
Give us a review on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, on your podcast platform of choice. Like, comment, subscribe. Check out the PDQ Discord, discord.gg/PDQ. Check out the PowerShell scripting channel. A lot of cool action going on there. Chrissy, I know people have been digging this episode. They maybe want to connect even further with you. Where can we find you on the World Wide Web, on the interweb, on the inner tubes?
You can find me on 2 places currently. The first one is LinkedIn. Just put in my name, Chrissy LeMaire. And the second one is at my blog at netnerds.net. That's where most of my content is going. Oh, and on GitHub at github.com/potato-quality, EE, 2 E's at the end instead of a Y. Thank you so much, Andrew. I have had an absolute blast. Thank you for having me on. I love talking about AI, and I really look forward to hearing back from the community. Let me know how you are getting into AI and applying it at your work and at home, having fun with PowerShell.
Thank you, Chrissy, for joining us. I will be shooting you some DMs over the next coming weeks and sharing my little adventures, and I'll probably be talking about it on the podcast as well. But Thank you, everybody out there. Thank you, Chrissy.
Thanks for listening to the PowerShell Podcast. The PowerShell Podcast is a PDQ production, making device management simple, secure, and pretty damn quick.